Kelli Thompson is a women's leadership coach and speaker who helps women advance to the rooms where decisions are made. She has coached and trained hundreds of women to trust themselves, lead with more confidence, and create a career they love. She is the founder of the Clarity and Confidence Women's Leadership Program and a Stevie Award winner for Women in Business Coach of the Year. She is the author of Closing the Confidence Gap, Boost Your Peace, Your Potential, and Your Paycheck. Kelli, welcome to Hustle and Grace.
Oh, thanks for having me, Hilary.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so excited to hear more about your story. So let's just start there. I know from the outside looking in today, you are happily married, beautiful child, own your own business, career is flourishing, but I know that life hasn't always looked like that. So could you give us I don't know, 30,000 foot understanding of your story and how you got where you are now?
Of how it all went wrong before it went right.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Yeah. So, I grew up a small town, Nebraska, that's where I'm from, went to college, got a job at, a nice stable company, which is what my parents always told me to do. And I found a job at a bank. And, because, I got that job early, because of just kind of my very religious conservative upbringing, one of the messages that I'd always been told as well was, you should get married young before all the good ones are taken. And you should have kids young while you still have energy. So as somebody who likes to check a lot of boxes and, be like, oh, well, yeah, that will make me look happy and competent and successful. I did those things. But because I got married young, that means I got divorced young. And, I spent a lot of my career in banking. Banking is a very male dominated field. At the time in the early 2000s, we didn't talk a lot about, gosh, why are there all white male leaders in leadership, right? That just was not a conversation that we were having. And, I remember working at that organization and I liked it. It was a great company to work for. But I also kind of remember too thinking like, gosh, if I want to accelerate in leadership here, like the people here don't really look like me, and a couple other things kind of started to kind of come up for me as well. And that, banking is a very highly regulated industry. I like to create, I like to do things. I don't like to ask for permission a whole lot. And that doesn't go well in a highly regulated organization. And so I remember after 12 years there, a couple of things had started to happen. One, my first marriage had ended. And, I decided, gosh, I just don't think that this career is just right for me. I feel like I'm pushing a rock uphill all day long. Went to go work for a technology company. I genuinely loved it. They let me kind of play around and do things. And we didn't have as many rules for compliance and those sorts of things. And, again, still working, it was healthcare technology, working a lot of male dominated industries. I oversaw HR there. One of the things I started to notice was, gosh, a lot of women keep coming into my office as the HR director because they're excited about a job being posted. But they were like, oh, I don't know. I only have like 9 or 10 of the qualifications. And maybe I need to go back to school. Maybe I need to get a certificate. And so I was like, gosh, I kind of really like coaching these women through doubt and, struggle, imposter feelings, because I felt those at the bank. I really struggled to speak up and, put myself out there. And, I just noticed other things too, like women just tended not to negotiate their salaries as much as men. So that was kind of my first clue that I had this little inkling that I really enjoyed coaching specifically women. Moved on again and was a leadership development trainer, consultant, coach for actually another author. And I was traveling a lot. And at that point, my daughter was now in middle school. And at that point, I had also met my current husband, Jason. And just the reality of being on the road was just starting to get really, really old. But one of the things that I was working on in that job was one-on-one coaching. And I went to my boss and I said, hey, I really want to get off the road, but is there any way I could just exclusively focus on, one-to-one coaching and, a couple of other things? And she said, that's not the business I want to be in. But if you want to go start your own business, you can keep this shared partner and I'll be supportive, which was amazing. So in 2019, I went off on my own and started my own coaching practice and training practice. At that time, I was just doing kind of more generic leadership training. I was coaching, men and women. And then the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, I lost, a good chunk of my coaching contracts that were employer funded. And I also lost a ton of speaking gigs because, nobody was traveling. So 90% of my income was gone overnight. And I remember having kind of a whole month-long pity party. It was bad. I'm like, I'm going to have to get PPP. I'm going to have to get unemployment. Oh my God, what is this happening to me? I never should have left corporate. But something kind of hit me. I'm like, if things can't get any worse, like if literally I can lose no more money, like what do I really want to do? And I thought back to all those years that I was in banking and I was in tech, and I was one of the only women in the room, right? And I had my own insecurities and struggles as, a woman in the workplace and struggling with things we just didn't talk about back then. And I'm like, I just want to go back and coach all of these women. I want to go back and coach myself, basically, right? People like me who are really struggling. So I decided, well, if I've got nothing to lose, I'm going to go all in on building my practice around women and making it my mission to advance women to the rooms where decisions are made. And so that's what I did in 2020. And it's been awesome, ever since, just offering one-on-one coaching, training, group programs, that sort of thing. And so, here we are. I would say that, as you said, it looks good now, but let me tell you, the first 35 years of my life were pretty rough.
Yeah.
Not making the right choices aligned with my values or my talents, and just really struggling with confidence. So,
Oh my goodness. Well, and I think that having that pandemic shakeup is such a story that so many people resonate with, because I was just talking with a client of mine about how, so many of us, we had been like in, I don't know, just almost in a rut of like just keeping all the plates spinning, and life was so busy. And then it was like everything ground to a halt. And then it was like, am I living in my purpose? Is my work meaningful? Do I really actually enjoy it? Is it worth sitting in an hour of traffic each
yeah.
day to go to? But I'm curious to hear more about what you have observed over the years with women in the workplace. How could you unpack how a lack of confidence really has been holding women back?
Yeah. So let me just kind of talk with just some of the data. That's where I always like to start. So I titled my book Closing the Confidence Gap without realizing that there's an actual study from Wharton called The Confidence Gap. I was like, well, that's convenient. So I was like, this will make a nice intro of my book, because what this study says is that they were kind of wondering, gosh, why is it that, women just don't advocate as easily for themselves as men do? So they had men and women take a standardized test. They did not tell them how they did on the test, but how they thought they did. Based on how they thought they did, they were supposed to go and advocate to these hypothetical potential employers about their performance and, advocate for a role. And I think we can all guess who did a better job advocating. You're probably in your mind going, the men. But guess who did just a little better on the test? You're probably thinking, the women, and you'd be right. And so the researchers said, well, you know what? Maybe if we just start telling women that they did better, then their confidence will follow suit. And in my book, I argue, actually, that's not going to cut it, because I believe that it's a both-and approach. For us to be more confident in the workplace, we need to see more women in the rooms where decisions are made. We need to see
Absolutely.
more women using healthy self-advocacy. We need to see, and it's not just women, like we need to see people like us, that are colored like us, that are gendered like us, in the rooms using healthy self-advocacy, using their wide array of skills and talents, because it breaks down a lot of like gender likability biases, gender norms. And, so much research that I talk about in the book shows that the more we have models in leadership of people who are like us, it builds our confidence. It encourages us to speak up. And, another thing I talk in the book, because I really say that this is both and. Yes, we need more women in the rooms where decisions are made, making policy, showing up, advocating, et cetera. And what? We don't not support people who are in the system while we're changing it. So a lot of the tools that I give in the book too about confidence is, instead of trying to eliminate doubt, like how do we recognize that doubt is a healthy human emotion? It keeps us humble and curious. And how do we keep moving forward, knowing that we're going to feel doubt as part of the process, and just really giving women tools to say, I know that you're still struggling with a lot of these things, but hey, here's some tools to help you in the moments that matter.
Yeah, I'm curious to know your thoughts on, I'll put it in quotes, executive presence.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally have mixed feelings, because on some level, I recognize that the way someone commands a room does make people sit up and listen to them. But at the same time, it can certainly come with some gender bias implications. It's like, be more manly, and then people will pay attention to you, and then they'll listen to you. So what is your take on executive presence? Like, where do you land with that?
Yeah, you just really pushed a button for me. So like when I
I
have lots
wondered.
of thoughts, Hilary. So let me just give you an example or story. Sometimes I have lots of times it's a male CEO that reaches out to me and says, hey, I would like you to coach this female top level leader, executive. And I say, okay, well, tell me what's going on. Well, she really needs to work on her executive presence. And, inside I'm boiling, but, I try to stay very calm. I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, say more. What does executive presence look like in your eyes? And oftentimes what they describe is exactly what you said. It's a very masculine way of being. Well, she needs to be more stoic. She needs to come in and smile more. She needs to, and then pretty much lists a big quality or a big long list of qualities of things that are either masculine, right? That is, hey, this is the white male patriarchal way of leading, or just some things, honestly, like that don't align with gender norms and expectations. She needs to smile more. She needs to be, more whatever, insert label here. And so what I often, ask them just very kindly is I say, well, that's one way to look at executive presence. Do you think that, perhaps that the definition of executive presence could be a touch broader? Do you think now that there's more diversity in the workplace, we need to, think of leaders as displaying, more qualities and characteristics than, what was on your original list? And I will tell you that those conversations never really feel comfortable, but I always, say, what, if I'm going to coach this person, I think you and I need to have a shared understanding that perhaps we look at executive presence a little differently. So, I really struggle with that term. I don't like to use it. I hardly ever use it in my marketing copy because sometimes I feel like, and when I even have clients come to me, they sometimes say, I'm reaching out to you because one of the things that shows up on my performance review is that I need to work on my executive presence. And I'm always like, ugh. So I really like to tease that out because you're right. There's something to be said about being in a meeting room and to be able to convey your thoughts and ideas in a way that other people will hear them. Yes. And I also believe, and one of the things I dedicate a whole chapter on is that, what, if we spend too much time and energy trying to be like someone else and trying to be more masculine or less sensitive or whatever, like we give away the power that makes us us. And so one of the things that I really work on with my clients is I say, okay, let's make a list of all the things that you've been called. Too direct, too bossy, too assertive, too emotional, too chatty, too sensitive, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, okay, instead of, then I ask them like, how much time have you spent trying to like shove that thing down? And they're like, oh my God, I do it every day. And I'm like, well, what's the energetic toll that takes on you? And they're like, I'm exhausted from self-censoring. I'm like, okay, so what is the gift that being too sensitive has given you? And I hear amazing things. They're like, well, because I've been called too sensitive, I can really learn to read the room. I know when people are struggling with change and I can make excellent recommendations to leadership because, I'm just in tune sometimes with how people are feeling. And so I can pull together groups. I mean, they give me this long list and I say, okay, well, how can we blend that unique gift of yours in alignment with your values so that when you show up in those meeting rooms and you need to be seen and heard, you don't leave that quality behind, but you use it in a way that's in alignment with your values, with your leadership values, the way, what you stand for as a leader. And so that is a great way that we can blend these qualities in a way that still feels good to them without them feeling like I need to show up as someone else. So like me personally, I was always called too direct, but one of my values is respect and one of my values is love. And I had to learn that being too direct, I overused if I was being blunt, and it was not coming from a good place of like respect or love. So I had to learn is, okay, being direct has allowed me to do a lot of great things. It's allowed me to be a great HR leader because sometimes I have to tell people really hard things. And a good way to do that is just to be direct and not sugarcoat. And I had to learn, how can I be direct and respectful? How can I be direct and loving? How can I be direct and still be creative about how I deliver my message? And so, when I, get off my soapbox of executive presence, my bottom line of this is I really think that we need to slow down and ask ourselves, how have we typically defined executive presence? And is that going to serve us, in the future of work moving forward, if we value having more than one type of individual on the leadership team?
Absolutely. And I love that it's true. There are a multiplicity of ways to lead, and different personalities can lead. And so one question that I had for you, in your book, you talk about different leadership styles. And I was like, well, that's refreshing. It's not just like, and this is how you lead, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how we can figure out which which leadership style we have and what that means.
Yeah. And so I don't even like to pigeonhole people into certain leadership styles as to where you're going. In the opening chapter of the book, I really encourage folks to define what they stand for as a leader, because going back to your initial question about how everything had to fall apart for it to come together for me was, you know, I think my life was so bad. I picked the wrong relationships and I was really struggling with jobs is because I didn't know what I stood for as a leader. And I used the Hamilton quote because this was an aha for me, because Hamilton, the musical, started to get popular around 2016 when all this was happening. And Alexander Hamilton says to Aaron Burr, he says, if you don't know what you stand for, what will you fall for? And for me, I was like, oh my God, I'm falling for everything. This explains everything, because I never actually sat down and said, what do I stand for? And so the very first thing that I work on with my clients is defining their values. And we all roll our eyes because we think of values as things being plastered on a corporate website. But I'm like, y'all, that's just marketing. We're talking about what we stand for. We're talking about, if you oversaw a Teams chat of people talking about you, what qualities do you hope that they would be chatting about? And when we can kind of really start to think about, oh, like that's my leadership style. My leadership style doesn't fit neatly into one of 5 categories. Are you an authoritative, a collaborative? Like, I don't buy into any of that. I think people are more complex than that. So I really encourage folks to think about, something quick you can do on your own is, what are 3 words or phrases that kind of define, what do I stand for as a leader? Another helpful question you can ask is, if I overheard people talking about me, what are 3 adjectives I would want them to use to describe me as a leader?
I love that.
During hard times and challenges, what are the qualities that I want to fall back on as a leader? When I think about how I'm going to communicate or make a decision, et cetera. And we start to notice some themes. And in my book, there's a big list of words that you can circle. But that's really how I tell folks to kind of define what their approach is as a leader, is to start to think about, what are those qualities and adjectives? And then once that's done, then you can start thinking about, okay, well then let's just say you say my leadership style is, I want people to think that I am creative, collaborative, empathetic, and direct. I don't know, I made it 4 words. Okay, so then how is all of my emails aligned with those 4 words? When I lead in a team meeting, how are they aligned with those 4 words? When I have to give people really hard feedback, how am I doing it in alignment with those 4 words? When I have to, lead a change effort or do something big in my company, how am I doing it in alignment with those 4 words? And you can start to think about how my habits, my actions, my beliefs, and all those things start to align with, the style that I want to be known for as a leader.
That's so cool. I also noticed that you have an interest in the Enneagram,
A
and
little
you
bit.
have, yeah, I'm no Enneagram expert. I do qualify as an Enneagram nerd though. So when I saw that you use the Enneagram in your approach to leadership, I was really curious about that. So how do you connect those, and what does the Enneagram tell us about leadership, or how do you integrate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wished I could have put the Enneagram in the book, but I actually did a little bit. And then I started to go down a rabbit hole and I had to pull it out. So
That's its
I'm
own book, Kelli.
so,
That's your next book.
I know, I was so glad you asked. But in all my clients that I work with, we use the Enneagram. And if you don't know anything about the Enneagram, it's just a personality assessment that tells us why we think, feel, and act the way that we do. It says that we basically kind of operate under 9 core motivations. It basically tells us what motivates us to think, feel, and act the way that we do. And, each type kind of has something that they're trying to avoid. And, when we are, sometimes unconsciously trying to avoid things, it tells us why certain people trigger us. It tells us why we avoid certain things. And so the reason why I love using it in my practice, I actually used to use the Myers-Briggs, but the Enneagram just sped up results so much faster,
Oh,
because
wow.
when women were coming to me, let's just say that I have lots of times women come to me because they're feeling overwhelmed and burnout. And let's just say that we discover that this individual is an Enneagram 2. An Enneagram 2 is motivated by the need to be liked and appreciated. And one of the things that they fear is to be rejected or not included in the group. One of the ways their operating system works is they like to be helpful. And so very quickly, in about 2 sessions, we can discover that a lot of times, a lot of the burnout that comes from their specific way of looking at the world through the Enneagram 2 eyeglasses is that they're exhausted because they're over helping and not setting the right amount of boundaries. They're exhausted because they have worth because they like feeling wanted and needed. And this need to be liked and wanted and needed sometimes causes their burnout, their overwhelm, et cetera. And so the Enneagram has been so powerful for my clients because one, it helps them identify that each type does have some unique gifts in the world, but also each type is going to be motivated by certain things. And so when they can discover that, it really helps them with some leadership blind spots. It can help them kind of notice when they have career issues, what could be driving those career issues. We could have a whole session unpacking all things Enneagram. I'm an Enneagram 5. What's your Enneagram number?
I'm a 7.
Oh, fun.
I don't know if I've met a female 5 before. Are you rare?
I'm rare. Yeah.
Amazing.
So there's not a lot of 5s. Actually, I'm there. If y'all listen to, if you're an Enneagram nerd and you like the typology podcast, I'll be on that this week. Cause yeah, they're like, there's no female 5s. So folks who are listening,
I'll have to listen to that.
5s are motivated by the need to feel competent and capable. And so when I track that back, and they want to avoid being overwhelmed or looking foolish. So when I track that back to my time in corporate America, I'm like, of course I struggled to speak up because I had this internal talk track that said, but I got to be competent first. I got to do more research first. I got to know all the things first. I got to read another book first. And because I was really unconsciously held back by this fear of being overwhelmed or overtaken or even like looking foolish, I still can like vividly remember times where I wanted to speak up, but like my inner critic would be, oh my gosh, but what if you look stupid? What if you look stupid? What if you sound stupid? You know, I have a lot of Enneagram 7s who come into my practice, and Enneagram 7s are motivated by the need to experience life to the full possibilities, right? We want to do all the things, right? Motivated by the need to, have fun, have lots of options. And one of the things that 7s want to avoid is they want to avoid discomfort, pain, boredom, restrictions. And so sometimes my Enneagram 7 clients come to me because they're really frustrated because they might get into a new job, but that new job smell wears off really fast. And they keep finding themselves dissatisfied in their careers. And sometimes one of the things that, causes that is one, they keep jumping from thing to thing. If they're an entrepreneur, they keep jumping from thing to thing. So they never actually accomplish a thing because they're like, ooh, all the money's in the next idea and the next idea and the next idea. But in corporate, sometimes they can get really bored. And one of the other things sometimes that can cause them a little bit of struggle as corporate leaders is they don't love having uncomfortable or hard conversations, and they don't love boredom. And so they'll kind of tend to avoid those things in favor of something that feels more pleasant. And so what can build up over time is team troubles that they haven't addressed because they just didn't want to have the hard convo, skimming over maybe some difficult conversations that needed to have about getting people on board with changes. So hopefully if you're listening and you're not familiar with the Enneagram, that's just a really good taste of how just knowing some of these unconscious things about yourself can be really enlightening as to like why your leadership habits and actions are the way they are. And then when you can become aware, you can start to ask yourself like, well, what would a healthy transformation look like for me so that I can be the leader that I'm meant to be and not be held back by some of these things that are in my blind spot.
Absolutely. And I actually have an episode from a couple of years ago. I had your Enneagram coach is her Instagram handle, Beth. I had her on and she unpacked like each of all 9. So I'll link it up in the show notes so people can go binge and like listen to that and begin to figure that out. But I'm curious to know, like with you're mentioning as a 5, you wanted to get sort of all of the information so you could feel like you were making the best decision and performing well. How does that differ from like a 3, like an achiever? Like what's the difference in motivation there?
So here's what I always laugh about a 5 and a 3, because sometimes if I take a free test, they aren't always accurate. I will show up as a 3. So 3s are motivated by the need to outshine others and be the best. They are competitive. They want to be doing the best job. They love efficiency. Okay. So that's what 3s are in, is like, how can I efficiently be the best in everything that I do? And I always joke as a 5, my goal is not necessarily to be the best. And one of the things I find myself laughing about sometimes just personally is sometimes like I really do have kind of like the thoughts of a 3 where I'm like, yeah, that would be great. We could do that. But a key thing about a 5 is we believe we have a limited amount of energy. And so it's almost like I have an internal governor on my energy because I believe that I need to kind of conserve my resources, that I need to manage my calendar very tightly. And so the difference sometimes between a 5 or a 3 is we're both really motivated. But I think many times you're going to find a 5 going, I've got the energy for that. Yeah.
One of my closest friends is married to a 5, and he's the first one to be like, I'm just going to stay in tonight. Like,
Yeah.
like he's like, I know my limits. I know my
Yes.
boundaries.
Yes.
That's so funny. That's so accurate. Um, I know that we're short on time. I would love to just get one more nugget from you on negotiating. I know that you've been involved in lots of negotiating conversations. Any advice for women who want to level up? Maybe they own their own business and they want to increase their rates, or maybe, they're going into a salary negotiation. Just like one piece of advice for them
Yeah.
on that.
I'm going to give you actually just 3 super quick things. Number 1,
Yeah.
know your data. Just know your data. So if you're going to salary negotiate, there's so many free resources. Actually, I have a free salary negotiation guide on my website, just under the free tab. So you can go find it. But there are so many free websites where you can find your data. If you're an entrepreneur, just go see what other people are charging who publish their rates on their website. Number 2, remember your results. I think sometimes, people forget to take into a negotiation, hey, here are the things that I've done, and this is what that's resulted in the organization. This is the value that I bring. And I think sometimes too, even in entrepreneurship, it's really important to, people might, I see this mistake a lot with entrepreneurs where they go out and they say, okay, well, in corporate, I made X amount of dollars and I'm going to divide that by, 52 weeks, 40 hours a week. And that's my hourly rate. No, we have to remember, we are giving away our time, talent, and intellectual property. So it's so important for you to just reflect and be like, okay, not just with the time, the data of what I'm spending with this person, but what am I actually charging for my intellectual property, the results that I deliver, the things that I know, the frameworks that I bring. And then I would just say, so number 1 is data. Number 2, own your results and communicate your ROI. And then number 3, make your ask and don't backpedal. Because of all of these things, I believe that a fair salary for this role is $120,000. And just because be silent. I see so many people, and I've heard it as an HR person, people going back and be like, but well, that's not okay. Nope, just make your ask and shut up.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. That's so practical and helpful. Kelli, it's been such a pleasure to have you with us. I'm going to plug your book. It
Thank
might be
you.
backwards on YouTube. Sorry, but it is Closing the Confidence Gap by Kelli Thompson. You can get it in all the book places. I'm assuming it's on Amazon, on your website, everywhere.
Yes.
Kelli, where can people find you online? Could you share that?
Absolutely. Yep. Come find me at kellyraythompson.com. That is the best place to find me. And you can find some of that free stuff I told you about. I've got a little Enneagram stuff there too. Otherwise, I love to hang out on Instagram and LinkedIn. So if you want to send me a message, you can find me at /Kelly Ray Thompson.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kelli.
Thank you.